sell. This shit crazy.
Yo, what's up guys? It's your boys Omar and Luke from Spiral here, and Gymnova, we're going to give a huge shout out to them because those guys gave us a bit of equipment for us to test out, and in that time we've used it, we've really enjoyed having it, and they've actually sponsored us. So again, big shout out to Gymnova guys. This equipment is wicked. Although it's fixed in our gym, it is easily movable around, but we'll come into a bit of that later on. Yeah, I'm going to pass it over to Luke.
Today, we are basically going to be doing a full review. So we're going to be talking about the goods, the bads, the uglies, everything about this equipment. Stay tuned, it's starting now. So the first one on our list of pros for this equipment is the versatility of it. It's absolutely amazing. There are so many different combinations you can make. I mean, particularly with the bars and stuff and the pillars, you can create things at an angle, which is something we haven't really had the resources to be able to do previously with some of our other equipment. The pillars that just kind of slip onto the edge of the bolts and stuff mean that you can put things out at an angle, which creates much more interesting setups and just allows you to basically change up the dynamic of the gym so that it's not all just linear, which is absolutely fantastic.
Ooh. Our next thing is, it is sturdy. As in, there's no wobble, or minimal wobble. There's always gonna be a little bit of wobble on stuff that's not fixed to the floor or fixed to walls and stuff like that. From the small stuff like these, as you can see, there is absolutely no give at all for those. It's wicked. And then the big ones, of course, you expect them not to wobble, but we have some of our own equipment we've made that is similar size to this, that we can't leave freestanding like this. So you can see we have got the bars in here, but we don't really need bars in it. It's just to add to our setup. And then, of course, we've got this huge square. It's an absolute monster. There is no chance this is going anywhere. You can leave it, again, not attached to anything, pop it anywhere, and it's going to freestand. And it takes our weight as adults, it takes the kids' weight, and you can have multiple people jumping at it and on it at the same time.
Next on our list of pros is the materials that these guys have used, because they're really nice. You'd think that maybe it'd be a little bit slippy because obviously it's not like textured or anything like that. Although there is a tiny bit of texture into the top of it, it's not just like plain ply. But for some reason it creates like a weird sensation of like a mixture between realistic brick and like traditional indoor gyms, which are just super grippy. It gives you that little bit of slide with your feet when you're doing things like arm jumps, which is really nice because you kind of expect that from natural walls. And naturally with the materials that they used, it makes it more expensive, but I think if they were to cut costs and kind of use different materials, you'd then start to experience problems like chipping of the material and just general wear and tear. And these have held up very good so far.
One of the things going on from how sturdy it all is, you'll notice a lot of the equipment has the bases on them. So one thing that we like to use it for, or I've noticed that kids like to use, is if they're not sure about a jump, there's something they can still jump to, or if they're climbing down, or if we're doing floor is lava, things like that, there's still an extra bit that's like not quite the floor that, although it spreads the base and stops it wobbling and things like that, if kids aren't sure they can make a jump, they can start from here and be like, oh. And then they know if they were going to jump from here to here, they can make the distance.
I think one of my favourite things is this. So as you can see, we've got a little crank here, and these kind of sit in one of the holes at the bottom, and you crank it up and then it puts the equipment on the wheels, so then you can easily transport it to whatever side of the gym you want to take it to. I think that this little cubby hole where this lives is just really nifty, especially if you've got loads and loads of different coaches. Sometimes if you're working in like a high-paced coaching environment, it's quite easy to get one of these and just like put it down to the side. Then you'll get another coach come in minutes later and be like, where's the crank? So the fact that these live in here, super easy, makes it really accessible, and you can never lose it. So if you're idiots like us, it's perfect.
Going on from the versatility that Luke spoke about a little bit earlier, you'll see everything has these holes in. So if you look on this big one, the whole front face has it, even the angles have it as well, and then all the way around the cube is exactly the same. Again, you see the bar going in here to the triangle, which has it, big ones with it, and then even these bolts have them. So you see the pillars, the hexagon shaped ones that add the angles in, that allow us to put the angles, and those big sturdy ones as well.
So one really handy feature about all this stuff is it's got quite a lot of handles. Compared to some of our other equipment, there's like a tiny handhold about that wide and that thin to actually try and get your hand in. It makes it incredibly hard when lifting, because you've got these huge handles, they're on like all four sides of the pillar, they're on the edges of the bolts. It just makes it really easy. So if you've got a team of people carrying it makes it so much easier than, you know, if you have to jam your hand into one of these tiny little holes or something like that. I think as well, it's important to mention that whilst this piece of equipment range that we have is absolutely amazing, there is a vast range bigger than what we've been given. So things like this incline triangle can be laid on its side, can be connected with some of the other vaults. You've got a vault that's very similar to this one that has like an incline face. So if you wanted to change the angles and allow for things like tic-tacs and stuff like that on a more accessible setup, it just means that the opportunities are basically endless. And I know for one, I'm definitely looking forward to exploring some of the other pieces of equipment that they have in there. So big up Gymnova. I think finally for our list of pros, we have, well, two things actually. The first one is the design's pretty cool. We've had some students come up to us and say that they like the interest in abstract kind of geometry on the front faces, which looks pretty cool. But my personal favorite is, especially with these pillars, you can just lift, pop, and you've got these little things, which means that you can just kind of pop it into anywhere really you want to. Generally on the edges work best, because if you look at the bottom where the base is, this one's got a base on half of it and not on the other half. So this part, which doesn't have the base underneath, will slot onto one that already has a base, if that makes sense. And the attachment points that they use on these pillars are the same on the bars, which means they are super solid. They're not going anywhere. If you compare that to some of our previous bars where it kind of just hooks and sits in, it means there's a lot of wiggle room and a bit of bounce on the bar. And if you were to lift it up, then it could pop out, which obviously isn't ideal. So yeah.
So moving on to the cons, we've only got a few because we've really had to think quite hard about them, just stuff that we've noticed over the time using it. One of the first ones we noticed is the curved edges. It's not the end of the world, just compared to if you're then having students who want to go into an outside environment. You don't tend to get walls like this outside. It makes it a little bit harder to grip onto because your fingers slip off a little bit. I would say these ones aren't really the end of the world. The one that's probably mostly the problem is the plastic one at the top here. And the reason I would say as well that it's a bit strange, because then if you look just around the corner here, this is slightly rounded, but it's still a bit more like a normal wall, I would say. So it's interesting that some have the really rounded edges, some have the plastic, and then some have the actual normal cat grab or like 90-degree walls that we have.
Next on our list of cons, we have the transportation and maneuverability of the equipment. Now, naturally with some of the smaller pieces of equipment, it's really easy when you put the crank in to move it. But this thing is an absolute behemoth, and it probably took about 3 or 4 of us to move it. So it just means that if you don't have a large staffing team in the building at one present time, you're probably gonna have to wait until all of your coaches are in at once so you can actually move it, just because of how heavy it is. Although that is a con, it is kind of a good thing because you don't really want these things going anywhere. So it means that they're stable when they need to be stable, and it just so happens that that con is when you do need to move it, it's a little bit more work than you kind of like it to be.
One of our next cons, or not so much a con I guess, but the bars are quite hard to move. While you're using the equipment, of course that is perfect, you don't want them moving anywhere. But like when we're moving around the setup, or if you want to quickly change the bar and move it to a lower height, you need to move both bits of equipment because there's no way of easily getting it in and out. Another thing going on from the bars, we've got these sort of plastic things hooked on, and as you see, if I'm turning it, my finger is basically jammed in here. But what we've done, we found a little workaround for that. We've just got some slightly smaller bolts and we can drill them in. So they're the same size screw, but it just means that we can drill it in rather than having to like do it up finger tight and make it nice and tight by hand. Last thing I'd say about the bars, they're a bit grippy on top, which again is a pro and a con. For walking along, balancing along, that is perfect. But when you're swinging on them, it starts to tear up your hands a little bit. And kids definitely complain a little bit that it's a bit harder to swing on than some of our normal scaffolding bars that we use. Cool. So we talked a little bit about the cranks before. One con we've had with those is, especially with this big triangle one, as you can see, we've got it attached to something behind it, but the crank for this is actually somewhere in between here. So we have to get it off, move it out a little bit, and then we can crank it. So as Luke was saying earlier on about the big, huge cube thing, it takes probably 2, 3, 4 members of staff to do it easily. So when it gets put into this position, we tend to just leave it there, which I guess is a little bit of a con, but yeah.
So there are our list of pros and cons for the equipment. Honestly, the pros list is way more extensive than the cons list. I think naturally no product's ever going to be perfect. If it was perfect, then you've had some sort of robot design it or whatever. But I think the equipment range is absolutely amazing. And I think more importantly than that, the fact that Gymnova have allowed us to loan the equipment first of all for 3 months and then given us the opportunity to enroll in a lifetime sponsorship where we get to keep the equipment now and they are partnered with us, which means not only are we going to be representing them, they're going to be representing us. And I think especially because of some of the contradictions between like parkour and gymnastics, that's a really, really big thing. And it shows that they're out to do good for the parkour community and help everyone. So I think that's what I can summarize on my behalf. So before I pass it over to Omar, I just want to say a big thank you to Gymnova. You guys are amazing.
So for what I'm going to say is the cons, like we said, we had to really nitpick at those. They were we were forcing them out almost, or they're just little things that we found that are annoying us. But in terms of running it and using it in classes, it's easy to use, especially for us. We've got a setup, we move it around every now and again. But other than that, kids come in and it's easy for kids to use, it's easy for adults to use. Beginners, advanced, can all find ways to use it, which is wicked. The fact it's so solid, ready to go, I think in terms, if you have a space like us, we had a short-term rent. We didn't know if we could build stuff up in the gym, so we've got some stuff that almost replicates some of the bigger gyms that have their own space that they can build up to levels. It's allowed us to get some of that similar sort of height variance in and angles, as Luke said as well earlier on. So definitely if you're in a sports hall or you're in a place where you can't put fixtures in yourself, bolt stuff to the ground, this stuff is wicked. It's absolutely quality in terms of, and it's ready to go. They dropped it off, we put it in, it was done. Yeah. That was it. There was no putting stuff together. Well, obviously you put the setup together in terms of the actual pieces. They come assembled, ready to go. You can put it down, run a session within half an hour of setting up.
Yeah, I think as well it's important to say that with the sturdiness of the equipment, it is way outperformed any other equipment range that we have ever had. We've never had an equipment range that's as solid as this. As Omar kind of said earlier in the video, we're quite big lads, we put a lot of power into it, so stuff naturally does move. This just gives you peace of mind that not only for your students, which is obviously the most important thing if you're a business owner, but yourself as an athlete and your coaches and your staffing team can stay safe on equipment that's actually built for purpose. So big shout out you guys.
Yeah, big shout out.
If you guys like this video, make sure you drop a comment down below. See what other types of videos you want us to do. We're going to be sharing a lot more about the Gymnova stuff, so if you're interested in exploring the brick range, make sure you head to their website. I'll put a link in the description. Equally, you can head to our website where you can see a little bit more information about how we actually got enrolled with Gymnova. Otherwise, guys, we'll catch you next time. Peace.